Hi everybody, my name is Steve Spain, and today I'm at the Peoria Riverfront Museum in Peoria, Illinois for their new exhibit, Classic Disney Art, The Art of Cinderella and Peter Pan. Now, some of my favorite movies are these, particularly Cinderella. On a personal note, it was the first movie I ever saw when I was 6 years old. And most of the exhibit contains original animation art that was used in the making of the films. But we also have a number of one-sheet movie posters that are in the exhibit. And here's a perfect example from Cinderella. This is from the original issue, 1950, and you see it has a lot of influences by Disney legend Mary Blair. Now, Mary Blair was one of Walt Disney's favorite artists, and she was influential in the look and feel of many of the films from the mid-50s, including Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Alice in Wonderland. So now let's take a look at some actual production work. This is production artwork that was actually used in Cinderella. And when I say production artwork, what it is the animation process starts with animators' pencil sketches or drawings, and then those are taken, the whole scene, and they are covered with a clear celluloid sheet. Those are then hand traced or inked by a group of talented artists, inkers, and then those go to the next phase to the paint department. And those cells are flipped over and they are painted on the reverse side, and then when turned over and then placed on the watercolor background, you have a completed scene. Now in this particular case, we have Cinderella, her dog Bruno, and the door. Each of those are on a separate cell level because each moves separately. Bruno's going out the kitchen door, Cinderella follows, and this door here actually moves. She opens the door so she can get out. So that's another cell level. So when you have it complete, this is what you actually see in the movie. And this was done frame at a time, so it was labor-intensive work. But this gives you the whole look. The backgrounds remain the same through the scene, but all of the cells are different at a rate of 24 frames per second, so you can see how labor-intensive this work was. And these are all originals. They were all seen on the movie screen because they were taken this as the original piece and then later shown on the movie screen as part of the 35mm film. Here's another one. This one is just a one-cell setup because it's just one character. This is Lucifer, the evil cat. And I think when you look at these close up, you can see the beautiful work of the watercolor backgrounds. You can actually see the brush strokes and everything. When we're watching these films, we're caught up, of course, in the story, the characters, the music, the conflict. But we fail to see that what we're actually watching is 24 beautiful works of art that flash by our eyes every second. Here you can take a look and see what went into these and see that we're talking about real artists who made these movies. And then here's an interesting one. This is the royal messenger delivering the invitations to the ball. And I bought this piece in 1986 from my friend Stu Reesboard. And when I got it, it was not framed, so all the components were separate. But I looked at the beautiful watercolor background, and of course the royal messenger here. And then this door opens because in the scene, Cinderella opens the door. And then this piece here, this little door handle, was on a separate cell all by itself. And I was confused as to why that would be. And then I thought, surely they didn't go to the trouble of animating that door handle. Why would they do that? They could have easily just painted it on the door. And I thought, and unfortunately, it drove me crazy, but unfortunately, at that time, there was no home release of Cinderella at that time. It would be several years. But a few years later, the last theatrical release of Cinderella came out, so I went to the theater, and I bought my ticket and popcorn, and I was watching the film, and when this scene came up, I was so excited that that was my scene that I owned, that I completely forgot to look at the door handle. So I had to go back, get another popcorn and another ticket, came back, and this time I was laser focused on the door handle. And sure enough, in the film, you see that door handle move from about a 3 o'clock position down to just 4:30. So it's really just a millisecond, but it's in there because it should be, and it would be, and it adds to the richness of these films, these little details. So Cinderella is my favorite film, everyone knows that. And I've seen it probably hundreds of times, but I'm not sure even I would have noticed that door handle movement had I not opened that package from Stu 40 years ago. So that's kind of an interesting story on that one. Here's probably my favorite piece in the entire collection. This is Cinderella in the ball gown, the classic image of her. What people fail to realize is, although this is the image that we all recognize, there are very few minutes of screen time where Cinderella is in the ball gown. She's really only in the ball gown about 4 minutes in the entire film. So consequently, art of Cinderella in the ball gown is very rare. Very few exist. But here we have Cinderella, perfect pose, in the ball gown with the sparkle effects. She's on a hand-painted master background that's used 2 times in the film, and it's in a matte inscribed and signed by Walt Disney himself. So to a Cinderella collector, it doesn't get any better than that. These are rare too. This is Cinderella's coach and horse. She's taking off at the end of the ball, racing to get home before midnight. Again, hand-painted watercolor background, a night scene here. But if you look at all the intricacies to make an image that's seen on the screen for a fraction of a second, including the little lacy carriage wheels, the horses with the lavender plumes, it's really amazing. And that's why it took, on some of these films, 4, 5, 6 years to create. There was that much work, very labor intensive, and we'll never see these films again. They just are impossible in today's business model. And this is near the very end of Cinderella. We have Jack the Mouse here, sitting on the castle ledge. They're all celebrating Cinderella's wedding. This is a pile of rice that they're throwing out. And this scene is in the second to the last and fourth to the last scene. And the background I particularly like, it's attributed to my favorite background artist, a guy named Claude Coates. Although this was years before Disneyland opened, some people point out to me, hey, look, there's some hidden Mickeys here in the background. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's kind of funny. These are some original periodicals, newspapers, and so on that kind of depict the life of Walt Disney. Now, long before the internet and iPhones and so on, we got our news from television shows and then our intense news, our deeper news, in magazines like Time and Life and the Saturday Evening Post. So here we have a range. Here's the famous Time magazine cover of Walt when he announced he was going to do a feature film. For the first time, a feature film had not been done before. It's hard for us to imagine because we see several feature films come out every year. But here's Walt depicted with the porcelains of the 7 dwarfs. Here's the Showbiz magazine Variety. And Walt Disney hails color TV as one of the greatest of all innovations in entertainment. In the 1950s, a lot of filmmakers were very wary of television and the popularity. Their thinking was if people could watch films, movies on TV, they wouldn't come to the theaters. But Walt embraced it. He knew that the cross-promotion and synergy and all those things could bring more interest to the movies if he could promote them on television. And here is a Saturday Evening Post. Walt's daughter, Diane Disney Miller, did a story on living with Walt Disney and what it was like. And then finally, in 1966, this is the extra edition of the LA Times after Walt Disney passed away. And then here is kind of the famous, this is the Paris Match magazine. It's a French magazine, and it says farewell to Walt Disney, and Mickey with teardrops, and it's kind of a famous piece of art. Our next film, and here's a great example of a one-sheet poster as well, is Peter Pan. Again, this is original issue, 1953. Very few of these posters survive because the posters were never available to the general public. In fact, they were made to go with the movie. The films would be delivered in film cans. The movie posters would go with them. After the end of the engagement, the posters would be folded back, taken from the cases, and they went with the film to the next theater. So really, there was only maybe a few hundred of these posters at best, and very few have survived, and this is a great example. Getting into some more animation art, this one from Peter Pan. This is actually the establishing scene where you see Mermaid Lagoon. You have the 9 mermaids here. This animation cell of Peter Pan was actually added from another scene and placed there because it was a VIP gift. This was given to a guy named Mervyn Cowie, who was a British-born naturalist, environmentalist, and he was remembered as the guy who saved a lot of the Masai Mara Serengeti wildlife in Kenya and Tanzania. By promoting tourism, he thought the money from promoting tourism and photo safaris could help save the wildlife. At that time, even elephant herds were being endangered by poaching and so on. So he was a key figure in the conservation of wildlife in East Africa. And he was a good friend of Walt Disney, and Walt Disney also did a number of wildlife shorts called True Life Adventures. Now, I mentioned earlier that the original animation starts with the animator's pencil sketches. Now, here's a good example of this pencil sketches. Now, they didn't all have colored marks on them like this one did. This was usually reference material for the paint ladies, so they know where the individual paint or shadows went on this one. Now, although they're not identical, they are from the same scene and sequence. So you can see the original animation art here, the finished inked and painted cell on the watercolor background. Here's a rare one of Captain Hook with a gold hook. 95% of the film, he has a silver hook, but in this one particular scene, he dresses up for a special occasion and puts this gold hook on. So those are very rare. Years ago, I envisioned what I thought in my imagination would be a perfect piece from Peter Pan. And I didn't even know if it would existed or not. Sometimes they don't even exist. But I thought, man, if I could have a piece, an original animation cell and background of Captain Hook, Peter Pan having a sword fight on a pan or wide watercolor background of the Jolly Roger, Captain Hook's ship. And this, I think, is the perfect one scene depicting the film of them all. I think this is just a great piece of art. Shows the action, the background's spectacular, I think. It's one of my favorites. Now, most of the exhibit here is Peter Pan and Cinderella. There is one other Mickey piece that's spectacular, and this is the one-sheet poster from one of Mickey's most famous shorts called Brave Little Tailor. And it was a wonderful film. In fact, if you ask 100 Mickey fans, vintage Mickey fans, what their top films are, I bet 90% of them would include Brave Little Tailor in their top 5. So this is, again, one of those rare one-sheet movie posters. And the movie posters are pretty rare, but even rarer are the shorts. Rarely do you see movie posters in lobbies advertising short subjects like Brave Little Tailor, but we have one here for you to see. And finally, here is an actual piece from Brave Little Tailor. These are very rare. Prior to World War II, the material they used were a celluloid nitrate instead of celluloid acetate. And very more unstable, a little wavier, much harder to preserve. So this is a particularly rare piece, and I've only seen very few. In fact, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen any Brave Little Tailor piece on hand-painted background with all 3 of these characters. So we have Mickey, the Princess Minnie, and the King. This is a great piece, and again, you can look at the detail and brush strokes of the background, see the meticulous nature of the ink and paint work. It's just a great piece of art. So I do hope you come down to the Peoria Riverfront Museum. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy seeing these classics of animation, and I hope to see you then.